Hi, my name is Noah Gift, and we're going to talk about Python statements, really the base level of Python. How do you build a statement? How do you declare variables? How do you use a list? How do you use a dictionary? How do you loop through those things? These are some of the things that you can do with Colab Notebook, with Jupyter, even by writing small scripts. So if you're new to Python, this is a great way to immediately get yourself up to speed, and it's going to be done in probably a little less than an hour. Let's go ahead and get started. And let me just get you started with what I would recommend is a good place to start. So we'll call this Python functions here, and we'll say 1111. And this is going to be introduction to Python functions. And I always think it's a good idea to add a README file, add a gitignore file. In this case, we have a Python file here, a license. You can do that if you want as well. And then once you've created this, there's a few little ACE cards here that I wanted to show you about that are really helpful when you're learning Python, because it looks like there's quite a few people that have really introductory level experience with Python. One of them is the Colab Notebook capability. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open up another tab here. I'm going to type in Colab. And so this is a free service that's available from Google. And you can take a look at this, and what's cool about it is that in a way it's actually a great way to learn programming. So if you wanted to just get started really quickly with Python, in fact they mention this, they say whether you're a student, data scientist, AI researcher, it's a great way to get started. And look, these are actually statements inside of Python, right? You can see that you can make a variable right here, seconds, and you can do a calculation and then run it. You later can use that same result. In this case, we've got the seconds in a week would be 7 times the seconds in a day, right? So you could do a bunch of really cool stuff. You can plot. And again, I think these Colab notebooks are a great way to get familiar with Python. And you can also use it as a form of research. So you can go through here and figure out, okay, I want to learn some machine learning, or I want to look at other resources, and you can see there's just a ton of stuff inside of here that they give you. So I think this is one of the stealth things that many people don't know about learning Python is go to colab.research.google.com, try it out, and there's a lot of fun stuff. Now, you can do that on your own. I'm going to show you this. If we go to new notebook right here, one of the things that's pretty cool is you also can just build your own notebook. And so I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna call this Python statements, like this. And what this does is it names the notebook for us, so we know what it is that we're working on. A lot of the courses I teach at universities, I'll have students create Colab notebooks because they're so friendly to work with, and it allows you to structure maybe a data science project, or it allows you to structure some kind of a project and share that information. And the reason why you can do that is if we go to here and you say add a cell, I can actually create a hierarchy inside of this notebook. So we can say, for example, maybe a couple hashtags, introduction to statements. And really what a Colab notebook is awesome at is introducing you to running statements in Python. And that's really the advantage of it. And so this is really the start of what most people do is they'll do a print here and they'll say hello world. And with Python, in order to print something, you just put it inside of a print statement and put these brackets around it. That's it. There's our hello world. Now, let me show you this button here on the left. This is called the table of contents button. If we click on this, notice that it now creates this hierarchy. So this is another awesome feature of this Colab notebook. So if you're a student or you're trying to teach yourself Python, I would highly recommend using something like this to keep track of your notes. So you can come back and actually go, oh, that's right. Yeah, I learned this and this and this and this. And you have like a log of all the different things that you've learned. And also, let's take a look at this. If I wanted to have sections here, we can even have a subsection, and we could say defining variables like this. And then from here, I can say, x is equal to 1. And now take a look at this. You can see it's a subsection because the way it works is these are 2 hashtags, and then this is 3 hashtags, right? And then if I wanted to create another main block here, I could do something below here, and I could do another couple hashtags and say, more interesting facts about statements, or whatever it is I wanted to build out. And then you could say, for example, var equals 1, var equals 2, or var 2 is equal to 2, and do some other thing. And we could say var plus var 2, and just print it out. So this is really the cool thing about using these notebooks, is if you want to master the statement in Python, by far this is one of the best ways to do it. Now let me show you one other thing that's really useful before we get into a little bit more detail. Is if I go here and I say file, we can save a copy into GitHub. And what's awesome about this is that not only can I work on this, just as really like a Google Doc, but I also can share it with other people. So if I go here and I say save a copy in GitHub, I can select the repo that I just created, and it'll link to all of the repos that I have inside of GitHub, which is pretty cool. So we can go through here, and I think I call this thing Python functions. So let's scroll down here, and let's find it. Python functions. There we go. Python functions 1111. Awesome. And if I go here, now we've got a copy, and we've got we've got a new statement. So if you click on this, look, you can even see everything that was inside of this particular Colab notebook. So really, in summary, an incredible way to get started with Python is Colab plus GitHub. It allows you to have this great feedback loop. One other thing that I'll mention here that's useful is beyond just using the Colab notebooks. Another awesome place to play around with statements is to use something called GitHub code spaces. So what I'm going to do here as well, and I'll give people access to this. What I'm going to do as well is I'm going to click on this code button, and notice how you can clone a repo like this. This is a very common way to get access to your source code, or this is really a new feature of the GitHub ecosystem, is you can click on code spaces, and look, it says welcome to cloud editing. You can edit, debug, and run your repository without local cloning and setup. So what's awesome about this is that this is yet another way that you can get started with Python and really build out a professional type software development environment. So in a nutshell, why would you use one versus the other? If you're going to, and we'll use both today, but if you're going to be building, just kind of playing around with code and trying out experiments or doing data science, I think there's a lot to like about Colab. If you're building more software engineering, like data engineering or microservices, then potentially you would lean a little bit towards the code spaces. They're both great. And let me show you a couple things that you probably would want to do. Notice it says Pylance is now installed. Do you want to activate it? So it knows that I want to do Python in this project because of the gitignore file, I believe. And so it can do syntax highlighting. So let's go ahead and I always create a Python virtual environment. Let's go ahead and do that. So if we go here, and I could say tilde/.venv. And the reason for this is that this allows us to install third-party packages without having problems. That's really, in a nutshell, why people create virtual environments. And once I create this, I can then start to install software, which is typically what I do when I first start working on a project. So give this a second here. Not sure why that's taking so long. Okay, there we go. So I'll go ahead and I'll source this virtual environment. Let's do this. Source tilde venv bin activate. There we go. And what I'll typically do when I first start off a structure of a project is I'll create a make file and a requirements file. And this again allows me to just get a basic structure for a Python project. And since I had already created some of this in the past, I'm going to steal this, which is always a good idea. And the whole point of one of these make files here is so that you can run things without having to do a lot of work, right? That's really, it's just lazy, right? Like that's really the make files. It just lets you do installations, lets you do tests, lets you do lint. And so from here, if I look at the requirements file, I can put things inside that are helpful. For me, I usually use the formatting tool, black. I also use pylint. I also use pytest. And I'll also maybe use IPython, I think would be a good one to play around with, to start with. Once I've got that set up, I just type in make install. And so the idea, again, for around this is just to kind of get like the basics set up here so that I have now a software engineering friendly environment. And once I've got that, we can also now start to play around with this environment. So one trick, because I installed IPython here to be aware of, and I use this a lot with building microservices or doing cloud computing, is that I can type in IPython like this, and it's essentially the equivalent of what we were just doing with these Python statements. It's the precursor. Before there was this really fancy, IPython, Jupyter environment here, and Colab and all this other stuff. Before all that existed, there was actually IPython, and I've used it for well over 10 years, and it's actually been the primary way that I would write Python code. And we can do the same thing, right? We can say variable equals 1, and then if I want to print something, I can actually say prints, and we can say this is my variable, and I could put an F string together, which would be like this. This is my variable, and put a bracket like this, and then close it out. And this is called an F string, and this F string will just swap out that variable as long as I put an F here and I put these curly brackets. So again, what's cool about this is I can play around back and forth and kind of try out ideas. And this really comes in handy if you're working with other pieces of code. And so this is a great way as well to master the statements in Python, is to get a Colab space here and play around with it. Now, let's exit this for a second and go back to the shell and look at how you could also write a statement in Python using just regular code. So what you could do is we could just say, create a file by using touch called statements.py. And if I double click on it, I can put anything I want. Really, a statement in Python is just like a line of code. So we could just go through here and we could say print again, hello world. And that's a Python statement. Now, if I run this, I can, in order to run it, I would just type in Python statements like that. There we go. We got hello world. So that's it. That's as simple as you need to get to run a statement in Python. There's a couple things to be aware of that you probably would want to do though in a real world project. And one of them that you'd probably want to do is add something called a shebang line. So if we go up here and we go here and we say user bin env Python like that, what this does is it tells the interpreter that it should use Python. And so what's great about this is that if I do chmod plus x statements, now I don't have to use the word Python, because Linux will know when I run this as a script that I don't need to actually manually call for Python. So this is a great way to make like a agnostic script so that someone doesn't need to know Python or Bash or Perl or whatever. They just run the script and they can solve a problem. And this is really the Unix way, which is you make lots of little utilities, and who knows what it's written in. It could be written in C, it could be written in Bash, who knows? You just want to solve a problem. Now, if I go here and I type in statements, there we go, we can see that it runs. So this is really a great skill to be aware of, is how to build a script very easily in Python. Again, it's just could be one line of code, and you need to put a shebang line here and then also make it executable. And that's it. That's really the start to building it. Now, if I wanted to, I could add this and push this into back into GitHub. So let's go ahead and do that. Say git status, and we can say git add makefile. Here we go. Git add requirements, and let's go ahead and commit this, adding more code. for a script. Add a little statement there, and if I do a push, we can see that this should now be available inside of this repository. Great, so we've already got a lot of code in just a few minutes. Here we have a Jupyter notebook. We have a small, we didn't push the statements. Let's go ahead and go here. Let's see, if I say get status, did I not? Oh, I didn't add statements, get add statements. So commit this and push it, there we go. Notice what I like to do is I'll do the up arrow and it'll go through all the commands, and that's a really easy way to find your command history. There we go, we have statements here, perfect. So really the next step is we got Colab, we have GitHub Codespaces. Let's actually start to do a little bit of Python itself. Like, so what are the key things that are important to know about with Python? So I think I can actually maybe hide this thing. Let's put this as a there. And really the key things to be aware of when you first start out is a statement, which we got that. But we also should know about some of the core features of the language. And so to start with, I think a loop is one of the best ones to start with. And if we go through here and we say loops, let's add this. This comes up a lot. Like if you want to write a script that calls into the YouTube API and pulls all the comments out of a post, or you want to query all the top stocks, or you want to query a database and pull up 10 records, you need to do a loop, right? That's really one of the foundational components. So in order to do a loop in Python, fortunately, it's pretty simple. One way you can do a loop is to use range. So you could say for I in range, and we can say 10, we could actually print out what's happening here. And remember, we can use f-string here, and we can say that this is the loop number, and we can just put in here I. So I is kind of a convention a lot of people use for a loop, and so every time I loop through here, it's going to print out this I. There we go. This is loop number 0, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Right now, notice that it starts with 0 and it goes to 9. So it is 10, but with Python, a lot of things start with 0, index 0. Now, that's by itself pretty useful, again, because you can do all kinds of cool loops. But in order to use a loop, most likely you need some kind of storage mechanism. So like a data structure that can store things. And so in Python, there's a couple flavors of this. And I think one of the ones to be aware of to start with is a list. And so if we go through here and we just say like a list, I think of a list as like a shopping bag. So if you go to a grocery store, you have the big shopping cart and you have just the basket. It's kind of like that bag or basket where you just want to put a little bit of stuff in there. And if we go through here and we just say like my basket, let's try that. And inside of here, all you need to do is put these square brackets, just like this. Here we go. Here we got like my basket like this, and you've got a square bracket here. You got a square bracket here. We just need to put some stuff. Just again, imagine you're going through to the grocery store and you're putting stuff into a basket. We can just go through here and we can pretend like we're shopping. We can put in here, you can put eggs, and we can put butter, and we could put, I don't know, an apple. There we go. We're going to make some breakfast. And so how do I know how many things are inside of my basket? In Python, you can use something called len. And here we go. If you type it in len and you type in my basket like this, what this does is it allows us to actually see the items that are inside of the basket, right? Or count them. And this is a built-in function in Python. So again, if we go through here, look at this, we have 3 items in the basket. And this is again why the Colab notebook is so awesome, is that you can highlight or cover, you can basically put your mouse over anything and it'll tell you exactly the type. In this case, it's a list, which as I explained is something that holds things. and then it shows you the count of the things inside of it. So if I wanted to do something with that, that's where the loops come in handy, right? So what would I want to do? Well, why don't I print out a statement that says I'm going to eat these things, right? So I've shopped at the grocery store, and now I want to eat some things. So let's go in here and let's pull these out by using a for loop. So in order to do that, we just say for food, and this is a temporary variable that we create in a for loop. So we say for food in my basket, like that. And that's really the all loops work that way. There's a loop variable, which is right here. And then there's the thing you're looping against, which again, in this case is a list that has 3 things inside. And now we can do again a print statement. We can say prints, and we put the F in there, and the F allows us to swap out the variable and say, I am hungry, and I am going to eat, and then we just put in here the food, just like that. There we go. I'm hungry, I'm going to eat. And what happens every time I loop, it'll replace the loop first with this, then it'll replace with the second item in the list, and then the third item in the list. Let's go ahead and run that. We just do shift return. There we go. I'm hungry, and I'm going to eat eggs. I'm hungry, I'm going to eat butter. I'm hungry, I'm going to eat apple. So this is, even though it's only a little bit of code here, right, which essentially 3 lines of code, right, because I created a list, and then I looped over the list. This is really how you can do a lot of things in Python, and a lot of the code that I write is just a few lines of code. So let me check this in so other people can get access to it, and you can just do the same thing yourself. So if I go here and I check this into a repo, let's just make sure that this is in there. Here we go. And we can go to Python functions. There we go. And what's awesome again about this is that anybody can go to this repo. You can just click this icon right here called Open in Colab, and you can just run it yourself. And that's what I think is really awesome about Python using the Colab notebook, is how iterative it is for other people to play around with it. So let's keep going though. So we've gotten here the loop, which is pretty nice, and we're looping with a list. Now there's another thing that's very common in terms of a statement, and that's working with different types. So in this case, this is a list, which is useful, right? It's very useful. This comes up all the time, but there's other data types as well. And in particular, one of the data types that is very common is a dictionary. So if we go through here, we can actually build this out. We can say dictionary. And so why would I want to use a dictionary versus a list to collect things? Again, in my opinion, it's a little bit like the huge grocery cart or the thing at Costco where you have the huge cart versus the little basket. It's a little more industrial strength. You can put more stuff in a dictionary and access it in different ways, and there's different compartments. That's the way I like to think about it. So the style for a dictionary is we can say my dict like this. We can create a variable. It is that you put things in brackets. So we go through here and we would say, for example, 1, and we can say apple. And then you could say 2, and you could say, let's call this eggs. And then we could do 3, and we could do butter. Right, so you can basically have a key value relationship with a dictionary. So again, if I kind of hover over one of these things and I say len my dict, for example, that's one way to look at the length of things in Python. We can see that there's 3 items in the dictionary, and also if we hover over it, it'll even tell you what's inside of it, which is really helpful. So how do I do things with the dictionary? That's really one of the most important aspects. Well, in Python, you can do this. You can say my dict dot keys, and this will pull out only this first key here, this second key, and this third key. So if someone gives you a dictionary in Python, that's a great way to take a look at it. And why is this so helpful? So if you're dealing with AWS, for example, you're writing a script, and we can probably cover a little bit of that today. A lot of times you'll get back a result as a dictionary. And if you type in keys, it'll tell you the fields for that nested dictionary. And you could potentially only select one of those things. So how would we do this? Well, if you go here and you say my dict like this, and we put in 1, look what it'll do. Is we can pull out one item at a time. So really the difference between a dictionary and a list is that a dictionary is a little more flexible. You can actually look up things by keys. And so what that means is that the performance is a lot better with a dictionary. And so in practice, if you had 1 million things in a dictionary, you could actually query it by key very, very quickly. And what you do is you would say this, you would say, 1 in my dict like this, and let's go ahead and run that. True. And what that means is, like, does this key exist anywhere in your dictionary? And so this is basically extremely fast. So this is called O to the 1 lookup, right? So essentially, you can look up a dictionary with 10 things, or you can look up inside of a dictionary with 1 million things, and it always will give you back the same performance. Now, what happens if I look at 5 in my dict? What's it going to do? It's going to say, nope, it doesn't exist. And so this now starts to let you build really cool things with just a teeny bit of code. The other thing that's very common with the dictionary is we were just looking at the keys. What about the values? Well, you can also do the same thing. You can say my dict.values, and you can only look at the values, right? So you can look at the keys, you can look at the values. Now, what about if I want to pull out everything, and I want to do a loop? Okay, well, let's do that. We can do a loop as well. So I'll add a little section here for looping with dictionaries. So what we can do is a very, very similar syntax as we did before with the for loop. Is in this case, though, because there's 2 loop variables, you slightly tweak the language. So what I'm seeing here is we say for, we would say for number, and then we would say for food in my dict like this. We can actually go through here and say print, this is, and put this in brackets like this, number. This is number. And then we can put in a comma and say, this is food, just like this. There we go. And once you've done that, what's awesome about this is that you can actually go through here and see basically both the key and the value printed out at the same time. And it says too many items. Well, what do we need to do? We need to call .items on this, right? And if I go this, here we go. This is 1, which is number, and this is the food, apple. So for number food in my dict.items, this should be it. For number food, this is the food. Yeah, there we go. This is 1, this is 2. We don't need this comma here. That was what was tripping me up. There we go. So we're able to print out both of these at the same time. So what I can do again for this this thing is keep making checkpoints and save this into the repo. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to say save a copy in GitHub. And I can periodically update the different sections. So anybody that's following along, you can just go back and get the latest versions of this. So let's go through here again and just take a look, and we'll just scroll down to Python. There we go. Let's go ahead and do a checkpoint. Yeah, and again, what's kind of cool about this is that this would be very similar if you're doing a project, is as you do your work, you just persist it into the GitHub repo, and then other people can play along with your work. So this is a good set of things here that we've done with statements. Now, again, remember, if I go to this table of contents, I can look through and go to any of the sections that I want. Well, what else is important to know about statements? I would say a couple other things that might be important to know about with statements. Let's cover those up before we take a break. I'm going to say let's add in math. So let's do a little bit of math here. So let's say math statements. And one of the great ways to learn Python is to just use it as a calculator. And I'll put a note here about this. So, use Python as a calculator to learn the language. And I'll show you what I mean by that. To learn it is, everybody's got a math problem. I don't know, how much am I going to get paid this week? Or, how much is our bill for the heating? Or, I owe this person 20%, what do I do? Or how do I make a tip? All these things are very common day-to-day things that you have to do with math, and you can practice your Python skills. So we can just do, 1 plus 1, right? 1 plus 1, that equals 2, right? You can just start playing around by putting this in here. What about, I want to figure out the tip of a dinner. So I go to $100 dinner and I want to see what 20% is. You just say 100 times 20. There we go. So you can see that your tip would be 20%. You can also do exponents. So if you want to see 2 to the second power, you just put 2 brackets here and now you've got exponents. So math is actually one of the other ways that Python really is very intuitive, and you can actually take the results of these things if you wanted to and use all the different techniques that we just talked about. So let's play around with that a little bit. So how would I build a math-based problem using loops, using lists, using all that stuff? Well, let's try it out. Let's kind of build out a math problem here. So we'll say, real world math problem. And what we could do is we could first make a list, and we could say, maybe we're building a budget for the month. And so we're going to put in our expenses inside of here, and we'll say, we have maybe $5 for some kind of a bill. And then we have a phone bill is maybe $90. Maybe the heating bill is $200. And the mortgage is $2,000, right? So we've got these expenses here. So how would I go through and add those up? So there's a few different ways that you could add this up. Let me show you how you could do it with a for loop. So we could say for expense, and again, this is just a temporary variable in expenses like this. You could say, let's keep a number here. We can say the total is equal to 0. So we'll start off with an empty total. And what we can say is total plus equal. And what this does is it basically is like a cash register incrementer. If you've seen that in the old days where you would type in something, you would say like add, type in something, put add. It's kind of the same concept. Is we would just, every time we loop through here, we can just increment that to the total. So we say total is equal to expense. And we could even say a statement in here. At the bottom, we could use a print statement that says adding the following expenses, right? And we could put in the name of the total here, which is, and we can say the total like that. And then we could have expense like this. So we're building out a neat little cash register here. We can go through here and we can just type in expense. And that's really all you need to do to print out a total. We say adding the following expense. The total is 5 and the expense is 5, right? And now we increment it again and we say the total is now 95 and the expense is 90, right? So it added these two together. And then from here we say, okay, let's add the previous items with this one. And now the final one is $22.95. So we can see that's our monthly budget, and we need to figure out how to make enough money to pay our bills, right? So you again could use Python to build out these real world solutions by just a little bit of code, right? So we've got a for loop here. We've got something that adds together the items that are in that list, and then we use the print statement. So my recommendation to get much stronger at Python is to look at these kinds of examples here and to play around with them in the notebook. So again, I'll just check this in real quick so other people have access to it. And let's just check this into GitHub. There we go. And we'll scroll down to Python for today. There we go. So the next thing, now that we've got a little bit of a feedback loop here for statements, which I think really this is the minimalistic thing to be aware of with Python are the things I talked about: statements, defining variables, doing some loops, knowing about a list, knowing about a dictionary, doing a little bit of math. That's really enough to do a lot of stuff with Python. And it only took, let's say, maybe 30 minutes or so. The next thing that I think is really critical would be to now start to build out functions, right? Now that we know the statements, we can start to build out functions which allow us to collect the logic of something and build out more sophisticated tools, build command line tools, build web services, build even distributed systems. So we're actually not that far off from being a very effective Python programmer.